All right, get ready, because we're diving deep into English history today.
Sounds exciting.
You bet it is. We're going to be using excerpts from Rachel Bladen's England for this deep dive.
Ah, Bladen's work. Always a fascinating read.
I know, right? And what I love about her approach is that she tackles English history chronologically.
It's like a guided tour through time.
Exactly. Starting with the earliest inhabitants and bringing us right up to modern-day England.
Should be quite the journey.
It really will be. So let's start at the very beginning, before the Romans showed up.
Okay, I'm all ears.
England was inhabited by various tribes, mostly farmers.
Right.
Always squabbling with each other, it seems.
Typical.
Bladen paints a pretty vivid picture of this pre-Roman world. Simple, but definitely not peaceful. What do you think?
Yeah.
How much of an impact did these early inhabitants have on the England we know today?
Well, it's easy to overlook them, isn't it? But these tribes were the foundation, really.
Well, I see what you mean.
Their customs, their way of life, the way they interacted.
It all laid the groundwork for what was to come.
Precisely. Their conflicts and alliances, they helped shape the political and social landscape.
So then, 43 AD, bam, the Romans arrived.
Game changer.
40,000 soldiers, imagine that, marching in, ready to conquer. They even built fortified camps every single night.
Talk about efficiency.
I know. And get that they weren't just focused on military domination, they were builders.
Master builders.
Exactly. Establishing towns, cities, and connecting them all with this incredible road system.
Yeah, those Roman roads, they weren't just for troops, were they?
Nope. Trade, communication.
It revolutionized everything, changed the way people lived, the way they interacted.
And let's not forget about their legal system and the Latin language. Huge impact, right?
Oh, absolutely. English law, even the English language itself, those Roman influences are still felt today.
Now, I got to ask, what do you think the native Britons were thinking when this all went down, this sudden influx of Roman culture?
Well, I imagine there were mixed reactions. I mean, the Romans were pragmatic, weren't they?
That they were.
They knew they had to integrate to some extent.
Right.
To maintain control.
Right.
So Roman culture started permeating British life. You see it in the architecture, the town planning.
Even the fashion and food probably changed.
Of course. But, the Britons, they held on to their own beliefs, too.
Makes sense, this kind of cultural blending.
A mix of Roman and native culture.
And it wasn't all smooth sailing for the Romans, was it?
No, not at all.
Those tribes up north.
Fierce resistance.
Which eventually led to...
Like Hadrian's Wall.
An absolute icon. What do you think we can learn from this? The Romans struggled to conquer the whole island.
Well, it shows even empires have limits, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Military might isn't always enough. Geography matters.
Makes you think.
Yeah, that north-south divide, its roots are in this era. And, it continued to influence English history for centuries.
Okay, so imagine you're living in Roman-occupied England. Better sanitation, safer cities, bustling markets, public bathhouses.
Those bathhouses, like ancient social clubs.
I know, right? Sounds like the standard of living improved for many.
For many, yes. But it's important to remember, it wasn't a utopia for everyone.
True.
Heavy taxes, forced labor.
The other side of the coin.
The impact of Roman rule varied. Across social groups, across regions, not everyone benefited equally.
Right, so 411 AD, the Roman legions withdraw from Britain.
A power vacuum.
The end of an era.
And the stage set for a new group.
The Anglo-Saxons.
They'd play a major role in shaping England, wouldn't they?
So tell us, who were these Anglo-Saxons? Where did they come from? And how did they change the landscape?
Well, they were Germanic tribes, you see. They migrated from continental Europe. And unlike the Romans who loved their cities, the Anglo-Saxons, well, they preferred a more rural life.
Farmers at heart.
Exactly. They settled in villages, cleared land for farming.
And they established their own kingdoms.
They rejected the Roman way of life.
Fascinating. Now, we always hear about those 7 Anglo-Saxon kingdoms.
Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia, Wessex.
Essex, Kent, and Sussex. Quite a mouthful.
They were constantly vying for power.
Leading to...
frequent conflicts, shifting alliances.
So different from the centralized control of the Romans.
It was a time of upheaval, uncertainty, but you know what? It also saw the development of those distinct regional identities.
Ah, I see.
And it was a time when Anglo-Saxon art and literature really started to flourish.
And their social structure. Very rigid, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Kings, nobles, freemen, and unfortunately at the very bottom, slaves.
That hierarchical system, it would continue to influence English society for centuries to come.
It's amazing how those early structures cast such a long shadow.
But, it's important to remember that this hierarchy wasn't entirely static.
Oh.
Individuals could move up or down the social ladder sometimes, based on skills, wealth, connections.
So there was some hope for social mobility.
To a degree, yes. But for most, those divisions between the classes, they remain firmly in place.
Right. And just when the Anglo-Saxons were getting settled, a new threat arrived. The Vikings.
Oh, yes, the Vikings. Those fierce Scandinavian seafarers.
They came raiding in their longships.
Wreaking havoc and causing chaos.
It wasn't all just pillaging, though, was it?
No, they were skilled traders and settlers, too.
Right.
Established communities.
Bringing with them their own language, customs, and laws.
This interaction between Anglo-Saxon and Viking cultures, well, it would have a lasting impact on English society, that's for sure.
A cultural melting pot, in a way.
Exactly. And one fascinating example of that is the Danelaw.
The Danelaw. Tell me more.
A region in northeastern England,
Right.
where Viking law and customs prevailed. And, this wasn't just some peaceful coexistence. It came about after a hard-fought truce. The Vikings and the Anglo-Saxon king Alfred the Great.
Alfred the Great. Now there's a name that echoes through history.
He's often credited with saving Anglo-Saxon England from complete Viking domination.
So how did he do it? How did he manage to resist them?
Alfred was remarkable, wasn't he? He knew they needed a strong, unified defense.
Against the Vikings, of course.
So he reformed the army, built a fleet of ships, and he fortified key towns and cities.
Always thinking ahead.
But he also understood the value of diplomacy. That truce he made led to the creation of the Danelaw, a period of relative peace.
Gave the Anglo-Saxons time to regroup.
Precisely.
So the Viking invasions. Yeah. Definitely a tumultuous period, but also one of cultural blending.
Exactly. They weren't just invaders.
They were traders, settlers, and ultimately they contributed to the development of English identity.
And that brings us to the end of the Anglo-Saxon period.
And the brink of another turning point. The Norman Conquest of 1066.
1066, a date that changed everything. Welcome back.
All right, let's pick up where we left off the Norman Conquest of 1066, a date etched in every English history buff's memory.
A pivotal moment for sure.
William the Conqueror, a Norman duke with a claim to the English throne.
Right.
He faces off against King Harold at the Battle of Hastings.
Epic clash.
Not just a battle, but a clash of cultures, one that would reshape English history forever. What was it like, this Battle of Hastings?
Brutal. The Norman cavalry, they had superior tactics and weaponry. They just overwhelmed the Anglo-Saxons. King Harold was killed and William claimed victory.
The beginning of Norman rule.
Yes. And William, now known as William the Conqueror, wasted no time in making his mark.
Oh, he had to make a statement, all right.
Castles.
Castles galore.
The Tower of London.
The Tower of London, a symbol of Norman authority.
And a strategic stronghold to maintain control.
It's mind-blowing to think that a place so synonymous with English history has its roots in this period of conquest.
And it wasn't just a fortress,
Well,
a royal residence at times.
Oh, really?
A treasury, a prison.
Wow.
Even a menagerie at one point.
A menagerie. Fascinating. The Tower really is a microcosm of English history, isn't it?
It reflects the evolving role of the monarchy and the nation itself.
Now, William also introduced the feudal system to England. A hierarchical structure that defined relationships between everyone, right?
Yes. Loyalty, obligation, land ownership, those were the cornerstones.
So how did it actually work? And how is it different from what existed under the Anglo-Saxons?
Well, the king granted land to his nobles.
In exchange for?
Military service. Loyalty, of course.
Okay.
And then those nobles, they granted land to their vassals, creating this complex web of relationships.
Bound together by social status and obligation?
The Anglo-Saxons had a hierarchy too, but feudalism made it more rigid, more formal.
With long-lasting impacts, I know.
Oh, absolutely. English law, land ownership, social relations. Feudalism left its mark everywhere.
And then there's the Doomsday Book.
Ah, yes. Talk about attention to detail.
This meticulous survey of all property in England.
It was like taking inventory of the entire nation.
It's an incredible historical document. What kind of details do they actually record?
Land ownership, livestock, population.
Wow.
Even the value of different types of property.
It must have been an administrative nightmare.
It was a huge undertaking, but it provided William with valuable information for taxation.
Makes sense. And for us, it's a window into the past, isn't it?
Yeah. An unprecedented level of insight into the economic and social conditions of 11th century England. A testament to the Normans' administrative abilities.
And their desire for control, I'd say.
Oh, undoubtedly. They wanted to make their mark on their newly conquered territory.
So the Norman conquest ushered in a new era for England. The Middle Ages,
Several centuries.
powerful monarchs, the influence of the Catholic Church, the growth of towns and cities.
A period of immense change.
How did the Norman influence shape English culture during this time?
Profoundly. Language, architecture, law, social customs, you see it everywhere. It was a time of great religious devotion, too.
The Catholic Church.
Playing a central role in people's lives.
Right.
And it was a time of expansion, with English monarchs trying to expand their power.
Both within the British Isles and beyond, right?
Exactly.
Now, when we talk about the Middle Ages, we can't forget about the Crusades. These religious wars fought between European Christians and Muslims for control of the Holy Land. What was the impact on England? How did they shape its relationship with the rest of Europe?
Well, English knights and soldiers joined those crusading armies, you know?
Bringing back new ideas with them, I bet.
Exactly. Goods, cultural influences from the East.
So the Crusades weren't just about religious conflict.
No, they also strengthened England's ties with other European nations. They fought together against a common enemy.
Right.
But we can't forget these were brutal and bloody conflicts. Their legacy is complicated.
A mix of good and bad, you'd say.
For sure.
Another big event of the Middle Ages, the 100 Years' War. England versus France.
More than 100 years of conflict. Can you imagine?
What a time to be alive. Battles raging, national pride running high, and the image of the chivalrous knight becoming, well, legendary.
The 100 Years' War really shaped English identity.
In what way?
It fostered a sense of national unity.
Makes sense.
And fueled a romantic fascination with chivalry and warfare. But it was a destructive conflict.
Both sides must have suffered heavy losses.
They did. It drained England's resources and ended in defeat, a real turning point.
And then, as if war wasn't enough, the Black Death arrives.
One of the deadliest pandemics in human history.
Sweeping across Europe in the 14th century.
Imagine almost half the population wiped out in a few short years.
Unimaginable.
Mm-hmm.
What was the impact on English society?
Cataclysmic. Widespread fear, panic, trade and agriculture disrupted, social and economic upheaval everywhere. And, the labor shortages.
Because of the plague.
Yes. Led to social unrest and contributed to the decline of feudalism.
It's a reminder that even the most powerful systems can be fragile in the face of nature's fury.
Exactly. The Black Death was a tragedy, but it also forced English society to adapt and change.
Interesting. So in a way, it sparked a period of renewal.
You could say that. New labor relations, a shift in economic power, a reimagining of the social order. The Middle Ages were ending, and England was on the cusp of a new era.
The Tudor dynasty.
The dynasty known for its powerful personalities.
And none more famous or infamous than Henry VIII.
He was a larger-than-life figure, wasn't he?
Lavish lifestyle, 6 wives. And of course, his break from the Catholic Church. Let's talk about that. His decision to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon and establish the Church of England. That was huge, wasn't it?
It sent shockwaves throughout Europe. It wasn't just a personal matter. It had political and religious consequences for the entire country.
What happened in the aftermath?
Religious turmoil, upheaval.
People must have been terrified.
Monasteries were dissolved, church property confiscated, and anyone who opposed Henry's reforms faced persecution.
A dangerous time to question the king.
The Reformation, as it's known, had a lasting impact on English society.
Shaping its religious identity.
And contributing to the rise of Protestantism.
And then there are Henry's children, Mary, a staunch Catholic, Elizabeth, a Protestant, and Edward, another Protestant.
A family divided by faith. Their
reigns reflect the religious tensions of the time, the challenges of navigating a nation grappling with a new religious identity. Mary I, in her attempt to restore Catholicism, well, she didn't exactly win over the people, did she?
Bloody Mary, they called her.
Because of her persecution of Protestants?
Her reign was short, but it left its mark.
And then came Elizabeth I.
One of England's most celebrated monarchs.
Her reign, the Elizabethan era, a time of stability, prosperity, and a cultural flourishing. Shakespeare, Raleigh, Drake, Those names are synonymous with this period, aren't they?
Adventure, exploration, artistic expression, that was the spirit of the age.
And Elizabeth herself.
A shrewd and charismatic ruler, she navigated those religious and political challenges masterfully, established England as a major naval power, and fostered a golden age of literature, art, and exploration. A high point in English history, many would say.
But even during this golden age, life wasn't perfect, was it?
No, it wasn't. Poverty was still widespread. Social unrest and religious persecution continued. Even in times of progress, challenges and inequalities persist. History is never simple.
So true. It's a complex tapestry of triumph and tragedy, progress and setbacks.
The Elizabethan era, despite its achievements, saw the slave trade continue. Religious persecution, social inequalities. Understanding that complexity is crucial for a nuanced view of the past.
After Elizabeth I's death in 1603, the Tudor dynasty came to an end. And a new dynasty, with roots in Scotland, took the throne.
The Stuarts.
A new chapter in English history.
One filled with political and religious tension that would eventually lead to civil war.
Welcome back. We're on the final leg of our journey through English history. Last time, we left off with the end of the Tudors and the rise of a new dynasty, the Stuarts.
A dynasty that would face immense challenges. Political and religious tensions were brewing.
A recipe for disaster, you might say.
You could say that. The Stuarts, they believed in the divine right of kings. Absolute power, but parliament. They were gaining influence, asserting their own power. It was a clash of ideologies.
A powder keg waiting to explode.
Exactly. And the first two Stuart kings, James I and Charles I, they both faced pushback from Parliament. But it was under Charles I that things really came to a head, leading to the English Civil War in 1642.
The English Civil War. We often romanticize it, don't we?
We do. But it must have been a terrifying time to live through. Families and communities torn apart, the very future of England uncertain.
What were the main issues that drove England to this point? What pushed them over the edge?
Well, Charles I tried to impose religious uniformity, and he insisted on his royal prerogative, basically doing as he pleased. Parliament was furious. They wanted a say in governance, and they were fed up with his attempts to raise funds without their consent. It was a power struggle.
And it wasn't just a war of words, it was a full-blown conflict.
Brutal, bloody. It lasted for 7 years. The country was divided. Royalists supporting the king, parliamentarians led by Oliver Cromwell opposing him.
Cromwell, now there's a fascinating figure. A devout Puritan, a brilliant military strategist.
He rose to prominence during the war. His leadership, his victories, they led to Parliament's triumph, and ultimately to the execution of Charles I in 1649.
The execution of a king by his own people. That must have sent shockwaves through Europe.
It did. It marked a radical shift. England became a republic, the Commonwealth, with Cromwell at the helm.
So, from monarchy to republic. What happened then? How did life change under Cromwell's rule?
Well, Cromwell was a man of deep conviction. He imposed strict Puritan values. Theaters were closed, traditional celebrations banned. He promoted a life of piety and austerity. It was a time of reform, but it also created resentment.
And after Cromwell's death?
Instability, political maneuvering, and eventually the restoration of the monarchy in 1660.
Full circle. Charles II, the son of the executed king, took the throne. But I imagine the scars of the Civil War, the memory of Cromwell's rule, they didn't just disappear.
No, they didn't. The Restoration brought back a more traditional form of government, but it was also a time of reckoning, rebuilding a nation divided.
And then, as if political turmoil wasn't enough, disaster struck. The Great Plague of 1665, followed by the Great Fire of London in 1666.
Devastating events. Tens of thousands died in the plague. The fire destroyed much of London. It tested the resilience of the English people.
But from those ashes, new opportunities arose.
Exactly. London was rebuilt with better building codes, a more modern design. It was a time of tragedy, but also transformation.
And amidst all this, England's global trade continued to expand. New foods, new goods arriving on its shores.
Coffee, tea, chocolate, even tomatoes. They all became part of the English diet during this period.
It's amazing how those simple introductions changed the culinary landscape.
Trade had a ripple effect. New industries, wealth creation, exposure to new cultures and ideas. It also fueled the growth of the British Empire.
And then a landmark event, the Act of Union in 1707. England and Scotland officially united, forming the Kingdom of Great Britain, a significant step towards the nation we know as the United Kingdom today.
It created a more unified, more powerful state and paved the way for Britain's rise as a global power in the 18th century. Of course, tensions between England and Scotland would continue, but this was a significant moment.
Now we enter the Georgian period. 4 King Georges ruling in the 18th century. A shift in power, with Parliament gaining more authority.
The rise of a more parliamentary system of government. The monarchs still had influence, but they had to share power. It was the age of enlightenment, intellectual ferment, scientific discovery.
And it was during this era that a world-changing event began, the Industrial Revolution.
A period of rapid technological innovation, the steam engine, the power loom, mass production factories, industrial cities, wealth creation on an unprecedented scale.
But with progress comes challenges.
Of course, urban poverty, social unrest, environmental degradation. The Industrial Revolution was a double-edged sword.
It changed everything. The way people lived, worked, interacted with the world. It also fueled the expansion of the British Empire. England needed new markets, new resources.
The 19th century was a time of great progress, but also great upheaval. Scientific and technological advancements, but also social and political reform. People were struggling to adapt to this new industrialized world. And of course, it was the era of Queen Victoria. Her long reign from 1837 to 1901 defined this period.
The Victorian era. We often think of it as a time of prim and proper society, but it was also a time of great social change.
Exactly. Poverty, inequality, social injustice. These issues came to the forefront. Movements for social reform, for women's suffrage, for workers' rights. It was a time of contradictions. Great wealth for some, grinding poverty for others. Rigid social hierarchies, but also challenges to those hierarchies.
And as we enter the 20th century, the pace of change accelerates. 2 world wars, the dismantling of the British Empire, new ideologies, globalization, technological advancements. It's a period of unprecedented upheaval.
England faced its greatest challenges in the 20th century, but it also showed remarkable resilience. It played a pivotal role in both world wars. It saw its global influence decline as the empire was dismantled, and it struggled to cope with the social and economic changes of the post-war world.
England's role in World War II, especially during the Blitz, it's a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Those images of Londoners sheltering in underground stations during the bombing raids, they're etched in our collective memory.
The Blitz was a terrifying experience, but it revealed the resilience, the courage, the determination of the English people.
And in the aftermath of the war, a new vision emerged. The welfare state, the National Health Service, programs designed to create a more just and equitable society.
It was a time of rebuilding, of social progress.
But the 20th century wasn't just about war and recovery. It was also a time of cultural revolution, rock and roll, new art forms, England's cities becoming more diverse, more cosmopolitan.
The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the fashion, the art. England became a global center of cultural influence.
And today, well, England is a vibrant, diverse nation, still grappling with its past, but also embracing the future, shaped by centuries of history. A nation that has seen it all: conquest, revolution, innovation, transformation.
English history is a story that's still being written. England's identity is constantly evolving, shaped by its past, its culture, its place in the world. As we wrap up our deep dive, I encourage you to continue exploring this fascinating history.
It's been quite a journey. From ancient tribes to the digital age, we've covered a lot of ground. I hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, given you a deeper appreciation for England and its incredible story. If you're eager to learn more, check out Rachel Bladen's book, England. It's a captivating read, full of insights.
I couldn't agree more.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive, please share it with your friends, leave us a review. We love hearing from you. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those history hats on.